Hi everyone, TheHande here. A little while ago on this channel, I brought you a ranking of all the He-Man actors, and you probably already knew that it was going to be followed up by my ranking of the 6 Skeletor actors, and yes, you're absolutely right. This is me ranking the 6 actors who have played Skeletor in all the animated He-Man series, as well as the 1987 live-action movies. So let's get on with it. At number 6, it's Brian Dobson from Mike Young Productions He-Man. Now again, this probably will not come as any surprise to anyone who has seen my review video of the Mike Young Productions He-Man. And while I want to give Mike Dobson some credit for trying to copy Alan Oppenheimer's performance, I think that honestly is the weakest part of this version of Skeletor. I don't think Dobson is as funny as Alan Oppenheimer, and honestly, I think the voice just kind of sounds a bit forced.
Return to the former site of the Mystic Wall and get me my crystal!
And that's the reason I've never really been able to really get into this version of Skeletor, despite the upgrade in his visual appearance. And yeah, I know Mike Dobson is a highly respected voice actor with an impressive resume, but I do think this has got to be one of his least impressive voice roles overall. But I will give him credit. I said this in the review video for the Mike Young Productions He-Man as well, is that occasionally whenever Brian Dobson was able to put a little bit of a creak into his voice, I think he could sound appropriately sinister. That's pretty much my biggest praise for his performance.
You are fortunate I'm in a chipper mood, dear Evelyn.
At number 5, it's Mark Hamill from Masters of the Universe Revelation. Now, I was not a big fan of Brian Dobson's performance of Skeletor, but I have to say Mark Hamill's was actually maybe even a slightly bigger disappointment. Mark Hamill, of course, is another incredibly respected voice actor, best known for voicing the Joker in various Batman cartoons. So when he was cast as Skeletor, I was really looking forward to what he was going to do with that voice, and unfortunately, he just sounds like a tired Joker. I mean, I get it. I think in this version he was supposed to play a more weathered Skeletor, but it took me to hearing it until I realized that this is not something that I really wanted to hear.
You did good, Lenny. Now, take your rightful place at my side.
I honestly was expecting a much more high-energy performance when I found out that Hamill was playing the role of all people. But I will say, towards the end of Masters of the Universe Revelation, I think Hamill did actually find his own voice for the role, and that's the reason I'm willing to put him above Dobson in the performance, because Dobson's was just a weak Alan Oppenheimer impression. At least Hamill was doing the character with his own voice. But it was still not a very good Skeletor, I'm sorry to say. At number 4, it's Campbell Lane from The New Adventures of He-Man. Now, Campbell Lane, I want to give credit, the same as Mark Hamill, is that he performed Skeletor's voice with his own distinct delivery and didn't try to copy Alan Oppenheimer.
Oh, yes, I can feel its power in me. I can feel my greatness. Oh, nothing in the Tri-Solar Galaxy can stop me because I am greater than the Tri-Solar Galaxy.
And that's pretty much my biggest positive. Skeletor is one of my favorite characters on The New Adventures, and one of the reasons for that is that he's honestly a little bit on the goofy side. Maybe even a little too goofy, because there were times that I think the scriptwriters went a little off the rails with some of Skeletor's silly lines, to a point where he's kind of coming off as a slightly less wild and evil version of the Mask. Now don't get me wrong, I think Lane could do a good evil laugh.
Greater than all!
And I do appreciate the comedy, but his characterization honestly was a little all over the place. And yes, just as with Gary Chalk, even though this didn't happen nearly as often, I do feel that there are some episodes where Skeletor's voice performance is just completely out of sync with his performance on screen because of the lackluster voice direction on The New Adventures. And yeah, it still bothers me that sometimes it sounds like he's saying She-Man instead of He-Man because of the way Lane puts so much emphasis on the H. Now we get to the top 3, and I'm going to say that I honestly did consider this next actor even at the top of this ranking. And at number 3, it's Benjamin Diskin from the CGI animated He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Now, the reason I like Diskin is that I think he's the only one of the actors in this ranking that slightly did channel Alan Oppenheimer's Skeletor, but did it in a way that didn't sound like a cheap imitation, and I think he's also possibly the only other Skeletor who has managed to marry the comical side and the dark side of Skeletor really well in his performance. The main thing I really like about Diskin's performance is just the fact that he actually does jokes. This is something that Dobson Skeletor very rarely did, and I love the fact that the show writers for the new He-Man and the Masters of the Universe were not afraid of just having this version of Skeletor make those silly jokes, even if they didn't always land. And, you know, sometimes they even play it off how bad they are at times. But also, because Diskin also performed Keldor for several episodes before he actually became Skeletor, I think they managed to find a nice balance for his voice. And whenever Diskin gets serious, he sounds absolutely great. I think that's also weirdly kind of the weakness in the role. And this is the thing that I kind of struggle with, because I wasn't sure if this was actually a big enough of a flaw. But you could say that this Skeletor performance is a little bit schizophrenic or splintered in half, because in some episodes, Skeletor just goes so silly, and then in other ones, he's very, very dark and serious. There's a little bit of a lack of a balance there, but like I said, I actually don't mind. But I can definitely see how this kind of a performance might put some people off and might come off as a bit inconsistent, so I'll concede that. And that's why I decided to put him at number 3. At number 2, it's Frank Langella from the live-action Masters of the Universe movie. Now, Frank Langella's performance as Skeletor is one of the definite highlights of the movie. This is agreed upon by pretty much everyone, even those who don't particularly like the live-action Masters of the Universe movie. And the reason's pretty obvious. Frank Langella has stated that this is one of his favorite roles that he ever got to play. And because he was such a big theater guy, he actually contributed even slightly to the costuming and what have you. The number one thing that I really love about Langella is his voice. I think his Skeletor is just so dramatic and so powerful and impactful. Even with the high amount of makeup that he had to wear, he was just able to emote and project himself so well as the character. I just always love his performance whenever I watch this movie.
Fight! Trace them! I want them in that key hunted out and brought to me! He-Man lives and possesses that key! I must possess all, or I possess nothing! Find them.
And the fact that he really embodied the character well. And while this version of Skeletor maybe doesn't tell jokes as such, he does have a lot of really nice, snide comments that land very well at the various parts of the movie, which is of course a nod to the writers. They did a really good job with Skeletor's dialogue in the film. So I've mentioned many times that Langella is my second favorite Skeletor. So having him land slightly before Diskin was maybe something that I was a little worried was going to be, honestly, a bit of a disservice to him. Like I said, I usually like the comical Skeletor a lot more, but out of all the serious Skeletors, I think Langella is handily still the best. And then, of course, at number 1, it's Alan Oppenheimer, or the original Skeletor. This was a very predictable pick, I think everybody can agree. Like I said, I did actually momentarily consider actually putting Diskin at the top of the ranking, and the reason is that I can actually find a pretty solid criticism for Alan Oppenheimer's Skeletor, even though I do absolutely adore his performance of the role. Because a lot of people might not remember this, but Skeletor didn't always start off as goofy. At the very start of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, he was actually pretty bloodthirsty, and he didn't even crack too many jokes, even though he did laugh a lot, obviously.
Get the air cart out of here before she comes back, and do it now!
What makes you think you can always order me around?
Now move!
It was only as the season 1 rolled on, and especially during season 2 when Skeletor started to get a little bit more annoying and nasally and kind of it started to become less threatening and more clownish overall. Of course, this was partly because of the writers becoming more and more enamored with the goofy side of He-Man, but I do think that Oppenheimer's performance also kind of lost any rawness that was there at the very start of the series, and over time he kind of became a much more goofy and playful Skeletor, if you will. Yeah, that kind of watering down of the performance can be seen as a bit of a weakness, but at the same time, I can't lie, I still like Alan Oppenheimer, even when he's at his very, very silliest.
Yeah! What are you going to do? Oh, here, get me out!
Even in the really bad He-Man episodes, I don't think I've ever been annoyed at Skeletor, specifically, even when he's being very, very ineffective as a villain. Unlike, let's say, with Campbell Lane in the New Adventures. So it was a tough call, but eventually I decided that it was just right to have Oppenheimer as number one. But like I said, the top three were very, very close on this one, much closer than in my He-Man ranking. And that was the ranking. Now tell me, who is your favorite Skeletor in the comments down below. Until next time, I have the power, so can you.